We're at the dawn of a really exciting transformation as we move from digital identity becoming just your identity. With the last 6 months, particularly with shelter in place and many people working from home, that division between online and offline has become increasingly blurred. And at the center of all of that is authentication technology. Because if you have one strong digital identity, but can't be sure that only you have access to it, then everything else falls like a house of cards. So I'm really excited to be here today at the Authenticate conference, working on how do we move and embrace this transformation, and how can FIDO be a part of that transition. My name is Mark Risher. I work at Google, where I lead identity, authentication, and security overall. And what I wanted to do today was to talk a bit about how we're seeing the future, how we're seeing this evolution from where digital identity really transcends everything and connects to all of the different systems that we care about, both in real life as well as online. And then together to talk about how we can evolve these systems, evolve the standards, evolve everything we're working on so that we can collectively deliver upon that promise and usher in a new and exciting future of technology. Over the next few minutes, what we wanted to do is to cover some of these evolutions, some of these new product ideas, and then as a team to talk through how we can use FIDO standards and Authenticate overall to ensure that people are securely logged into their systems, that we know who they are, that we can defend against all of the threats that are out there, and that we can move things forward together. So what do we mean by identity? And it's worth beginning at that point because many people have very different understandings or definitions. To some people, identity is an email address. And in fact, for many of us in this audience, when we first came online, our identifier was email because that was something we used every single day. But at the same time, for well over half the planet, this string with an @ sign in the middle is completely meaningless and irrelevant to them. So that's not identity for them. For other people, a phone number might be identity. They look at the most commonly used form of communication today, and that's how they authenticate, that's how they prove who they are. But again, how does this fit together? It's not complete, it's not exhaustive, and it doesn't really touch on all the facets of identity. For much of my engineering team, identity is really just an opaque identifier, a 64-bit integer that allows them to do lookups within internal databases and merge together all of the various data streams that they care about. And for others, it might be a bespoke identifier, like my handle on Twitter or on Instagram or WhatsApp, various social networks, how people connect those together. But first and foremost, what we mean by identity, what I mean by identity, is me. It's how do we map ourselves into the digital world? How do we connect Mark the person who may have many different accounts with the online services, the data that it's stored, and all the different pieces that I care about? At the same time, what we're seeing is in the olden days, as we evolve from just using an email address as the identifier, we're also evolving from email itself being the prime thing. If I had $1 for every time someone talks about a Gmail account, I'd be wealthy because it's so much more than that, but people are still stuck in that original world. But what we see that's very exciting is this transition and these trends that are moving us forward into this next wave of online identity. The first one is this trend and this necessity around protection. Everyone wants to stay safe online. Headlines every single day are talking about more and more bad things transpiring. And so protection takes place at the identity level. When you move to the cloud, everything becomes an authentication challenge. And so likewise, with all of our online services, protecting you is essential, and identity is a key part of that. The second one is a trend towards connection. Once upon a time, maybe when we were dialing into AOL, everything lived in that one little sandbox, and you could move around and interplay with that. But today, that's nowhere near enough. Today, what everyone's looking for from technology is the connectedness, the interplay amongst different services. If I want to book dinner, then it needs to know my schedule, my preferences, your preferences, what restaurants available, if we could go outside, what all the different pieces are of the logistics to get us there. And that's a multi-part scenario where, again, identity is that common join key that brings it all together. And the third important trend is personalization. When Google first launched, everyone who typed in the same query would get the same 10 blue links showing up right there on the page. But again, not just in our products, but in all, that's not good enough anymore. People expect a personalized experience. They should get something that is relevant to them that'll be very different than what's relevant to you. And there again, identity is right at the heart of it. That's how we anchor on the you, on what is it that we're personalizing and what is the service that we're delivering for the individual. And so as those trends come together, we see an increasing need, an increasing demand placed upon our identity and our authentication systems. At the same time, our whole world of technology is facing tremendous headwinds due to eroding trust. It comes as no surprise, this techlash, but in fact, the pressures continue rising. There are more and more people out there that both expect more from technology, but that are cynical or skeptical of how it is that we operate, what it is that we collect, and how it all fits together. And so there's a tremendous need to improve upon that. At Google, our investment in how we earn back that trust and how we move forward in technology rests on three key pillars. The first of these principles is that we protect your information. We need to keep it secure. We need to ensure that, sine qua non, you are the only person who can get into that data. Nobody else can access it without you having control over that. And that allows people to begin building more and more upon it. The second pillar is that we need to treat that data responsibly. We need to ensure that we are upholding the contract that we've got with each and every one of our users, that we are managing internally, that we are providing transparency on how things fit together, and that we're allowing users to make decisions on what should happen. And then the third pillar, which builds upon all of it, is that the user is in control. In every single place, we want to allow our users to choose how they interact with products, what data they share, how they engage, and that collectively that they then can understand and they can set the requirements for when should a piece of information be used, when should it be expunged, how should it flow amongst all those different connected systems that we talked about. We firmly believe that by investing in all three of those pillars, we can provide a trustworthy experience, and then we can live up to the potential that both our users see in us and that we see in the technology world moving forward. So let's dive into that first piece, that secure part, which I think is the most relevant and the most pertinent for the audience here today. Probably unsurprisingly, the 800-pound gorilla in the room is phishing. While headlines talk every single day about, ODAs and malware and advanced persistent threats, these are real, but for the vast majority of people, and certainly by volume, the most concerning and the most dangerous threat is from phishing. In fact, to share a bit of our experience from a Google standpoint, we have recently invested in our built-in password checkup. This scans through any passwords that you saved online, anything for all the different third-party sites that you engage with, and then compares them against a breach database that we've assembled from research from throughout the deep dark web, from throughout the internet as a whole. We've recently brought that up well in excess of 8 billion unique username and password pairs. And as we run through that, we find a tremendous amount of password reuse and a tremendous amount of people relying on compromised passwords. That's because while it's not nearly as sexy as building an ODA exploit, it is much, much more effective and so much cheaper to operate. And so phishing runs at scale. But fortunately, I don't need to tell you, we have an antidote for that. And the antidote is the security key technology that FIDO has been driving from the beginning. In fact, we're so confident that we've deployed it at Google for 100% of our employee and temp vendor base. And since doing that, since achieving that milestone in 2017, we've had 0 cases of password phishing. That's because this technology works. It's incredibly effective. It's incredibly simple. Users don't even know what's going on, but they find that they are just not getting phished. And so that's why it's such a big bet for us from the employee proof point that we've been working over the last several years to try to roll it out into the real world starting with the highest risk users that use Google services. We made security keys a cornerstone, a flagship of our advanced protection program in 2017. We then expanded in 2019 to allow people to use their phone and either the secure element or a software-based security key built into the phone. And then at the beginning of this year, we moved even one step further and said, you can use just your phone. No special purpose hardware required. We just allow people to sign in with their device and then get going. In fact, let's watch a video of how the Advanced Protection Program positions this and demonstrates that it's both the most secure technology as well as some of the most convenient.
For most people, Google's built-in account protection is all they need to keep their personal information secure. But for those at risk of highly targeted online attacks, we've created the Advanced Protection Program, Google's strongest level of account security to keep your private information safe from a wide range of threats. It continuously evolves to add protections as new threats arise. Here's how it works. Attackers often attempt to access your data by impersonating you. Advanced protection goes beyond two-step authentication by requiring your physical security key, or the one built into your phone, when signing in from a new device. Without the key, even an attacker with your password won't be able to access your data. Downloading potentially unsafe content is another point of vulnerability. When using Chrome, Advanced Protection scans files before every download. You'll receive warnings about risks, and dangerous downloads will be automatically blocked. It also helps keep malware off your Android phone, only allowing app installs from trusted sources, like Google Play. To provide you with a more seamless experience, apps and websites may ask for permission to access things like your locations, contacts, and calendar. While this is usually safe, some requests could be fraudulent. To help protect you, Advanced Protection only allows Google and vetted apps from trusted third parties to request access to your data. Enroll and learn more about how Advanced Protection keeps your private information secure at g.co/advancedprotection.
That's how we've been pushing out through Advanced Protection, and we're seeing tremendous adoption. In fact, earlier this year, we were able to get an arrangement going with a nonprofit called Defending Digital Campaigns that allowed us to offer physical security keys for free to any approved and recognized federal campaign, either congressional or presidential. And since then, we've seen tremendous uptake, which is not surprising considering how broad the adoption and awareness is now starting to be. Across all of the major platforms, whether it's the browsers, the operating systems, or even hardware manufacturers themselves, we're now seeing that FIDO is supported natively, that the standards are baked in, and that there's UI that users are starting to recognize. When I first joined Google, the user interface that said touch your security key was very clearly built directly by the engineers that had done the integration. But now we've been able to move that into the actual front end team, the people who should be doing this, and building something that feels native and that uses built-on device sensors like a Touch ID or a face in conjunction with WebAuthn. And so that's why we're seeing a lot of adoption, a lot of awareness out there. We're also seeing increased knowledge among the cognoscenti. We're seeing, newspaper articles, not just the tech press, but mainstream press, talking about how to use a security key, what's the best security key. There's actually bake-offs and comparisons. We're seeing, adoption in various high-risk segments, whether it's the political that I mentioned before, journalists who are frequently tweeting about how they recommend for their newsrooms, or even Crypto Girl who's saying that, for Bitcoin trading, which seems to be, purpose-built for phishing, really, that security keys are the most effective and really the sort of bottom line for how you should be defending yourself. We do, however, still have some challenges when it comes to hardware. So we've mentioned that we've been working on the phone within Google. Many of you know that, unfortunately, this is right now limited to signing in for Google. And even there, we still do see compatibility issues that we're trying to stamp out. Bluetooth stacks are not what they're promised to be. The variation amongst different manufacturers make this challenging. So there's work for all of us there to push this technology, which I think is much more likely to see mainstream adoption, so that it works 100% of the time across all different variations of devices. Back to the physical keys, though, there is still a need, and there's a challenge there as well. We've been trying to work on how do we make it fit and feel right? How do we make something that people want to carry around with them? Or if they don't carry around, that they don't just throw it in a drawer and then lose it when they need it. And so there's some hardware form factor things to work through. There are also questions around communications protocols. We've had USB for years, but as ports keep changing on different devices, that sometimes confuses people. NFC has some challenges. It's becoming more universal, but where do you line it up on the back of your phone? That can be a challenge. And then Bluetooth. We had an unfortunate incident with some Bluetooth integration last year, but still from that, as I mentioned, the Bluetooth drivers and stacks are not where they should be. And the reliance on a battery makes this less than perfect for that emergency when you need to re-authenticate and just can't find the key or find it and it's got a dead battery. There's also been some fear, uncertainty, and doubt spread around the provenance of these different keys. Does it matter? Which key should I get? What country is it manufactured in? We think that that's all a smokescreen, that when the alternative is using just a password or using a password plus a phishable one-time OTP, that moving to any security key puts you into a much better place. And let's not bicker around like where it was made or how it was built. Beyond the hardware challenges, though, there's some other pieces, which is how do we get people to use them and how do we fit it into their workflow? The other 800-pound gorilla is account recovery. As we have started pushing security key technology broader and broader and gotten to a much less savvy audience, we've unfortunately seen a very disturbing spike in the number of recovery or lockout incidents, where somebody maybe sets up and they have the keys at the moment, but then they lose them, or they don't realize how important they are, or they only have one, and so they're up the creek without a backup. These are real challenges, and I'm pleased to hear that Authenticate, or rather that FIDO, has a session set up around recovery, because I think that's one of the most challenging issues around not just authentication, but digital identity overall. A lot of people talk about self-sovereign identity and this idea that you could just generate a public-private key pair from some entropy you've got lying around, and then you're good to go forever. But seeing the types of recovery and lockout numbers that I see, I have really no faith in that as a durable way to build an identity, particularly if your services are permanently bound to it, and therefore losing it requires you to just refresh and start again, have a digital rebirth. So we think that using a large service provider with multiple factors is most likely how many people will engage, even if they generate their identity in their public-private key pair themselves. And so recovery remains one of the biggest challenges for me in this space. Finally, though, the other big and important emerging trend is the move towards next-generation platforms. In 1988, Mark Weiser, who was at Xerox PARC at the time, coined the term or popularized the term of ubiquitous computing. And in that, he talked about how computers should be quiet, they should fade into the background, and they should help you accomplish your task. And that, maybe it took longer than he anticipated, but that's the dawn that we're at right now with technology. As we move from a PC, which sat on your desk, to a phone, which carries with you, to then the computer fading into the background and just being around you. Not in a creepy way, but in an empowering way, in a way that we're starting to see with smart digital assistant, with shared devices that sit in the home, with sensors that are built into televisions and smart displays and speakers and all these different apparatus that we put in our households. As we engage with those, it's really important that we think through what does authentication mean in those types of environments. And so we at our company at Google have been thinking about what does that device bootstrapping look like? Does it always involve taking your phone, using a FIDO authenticator to set up the phone, and then using the phone over a different protocol to talk to the device? Or is there a special IoT way that we want to get these smart televisions and smart toasters to be able to know our accounts, connect to our identities, and seamlessly interact with all the different pieces around the world? And so that brings me to FIDO and why we're here today, which is what is this forum for? some people have even asked me, now that the standards are out there, now that we generally have it working on most of the web browsers and most of the operating systems, are we done? Is it time to sort of wrap up and move on? But I think far from it, like quite the opposite. Standards have a way of plateauing and then not embracing some of these additional themes and these additional trends. So the work towards IoT, the work towards account recovery, the work towards getting that truly ubiquitous form factor, there's plenty ahead of us. And I'm really excited to have everyone here today at this conference so that we can team up and collectively embrace that and move forward. We're at this very exciting, very interesting, and very momentous transformation from the technology and the platforms that we've used in the past, signing into an email account on a laptop that stays, fixed on your desk, into this much more transformative, ubiquitous computing world where the sensors are always there, the computer is always at your beck and call, but it needs to know who you are. The you, as I've said, is our digital identities, which increasingly are our real world identities. And authentication and the FIDO standards lie right at the heart of it. I'm so excited to be part of this organization. I'm really glad to be kicking off this summit for you all today. And I look forward to seeing what everyone comes up with as we work together on unlocking this new digital future. Thank you.